clear. Go.
Welcome everyone to week 8, The Ripple Effect with guest judge Jessica Vandenberghe. We'd like to open tonight's session by acknowledging the footsteps that have marked Canada's land for generations. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who have gone before us and are still with us today. Our recognition of this land is an act of reconciliation and an expression of our gratitude to those whose territory we reside on and are visiting. We apologize in advance for any errors made when pronouncing traditional names. We are learning too. Jessica, Hope, and I are joining the shooting range, a photography challenge from Edmonton, which is located on Treaty 6 territory, home of the Nahiawak, Anishinaabe, sorry,
Anishinaabe.
Anishinaabe, sorry, Nahitsatipi, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. A huge thank you and a welcome to our panel judges who have been with us on this roller coaster along with the challengers from week 1. Ronald of Ronald Lee Studios is situated in British Columbia on the unceded ancestral territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam nations. Maggie of Mag Photography joins us from New Brunswick, the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik, I think I said that right, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy. Say it for me, Hope.
Passamaquoddy.
Passamaquoddy. I'm so bad at languages. And Spencer of Spencer Wind Photography of the Upper Canada Treaties territory, home of the Mississauga. Thank you, Mississauga of the Credit and
Anishinaabe.
Chippewa, Haudenosaunee. I practiced this and I still. And Huron Wendat peoples. I apologize.
You did good.
I'm trying. So this week's guest judge is of Dene descent, a 60 scoop survivor. Jessica was adopted by a loving family and decided to turn her life and career as an Indigenous female to the pursuit of equity, diversity, and inclusivity. She is professor and dean in the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Alberta, a field underrepresented by both females and Indigenous people, and has dedicated the past several years of her life being a role model, inspiration, and speaker. She freely shares her knowledge, her personal journey, and her desire to create a positive ripple effect through workshops, her podcasts, and of course, invitations to participate in events like the shooting range. Jessica, thank you so much for being here. And before we get started, we have a quick question for you. Land acknowledgements are met with mixed feelings. Some think of it as respectfully answering the truth and reconciliation calls to action. Others include them to pay obligatory lip service, and yet others just feel awkward or unsure, perhaps out of fear that they will mispronounce the names, perhaps because they feel insincere, and perhaps because of guilt or shame. How can people step out of their discomfort to embrace the spirit of the land acknowledgements and, in the bigger picture, truth and reconciliation?
This is a great question, and you did very well. Thanks for the courage to work on those pronunciations. I know it takes a lot of courage sometimes to take these steps. For me, land acknowledgements is something that is a small step that people can take towards calls to action. So it's a way to practice that. It's a way to acknowledge Canada's oppressive history. It's a way to also respectfully honor the natural law that Indigenous people follow and are stewards to, being the translators for what nature teaches us, and what lessons we can learn from life and how to walk in a good way from those lessons. And so for me, a true land acknowledgement is something that's very authentic. It comes down to a gesture of truth and reconciliation. And so it comes down to the conversation of what is reconciliation. I don't agree with the word reconciliation. I think there are better words to use. Reconciliation implies that you can tally something up and we can make it even and call it a day and go our separate ways. That's not what it is. Sometimes we hear conciliation, but I really like reciprocity. So if you look up reciprocity, it's walking together in a good way, right? Like we're going to go forward together. How do we work together and come to a common understanding together? But land acknowledgements is a gesture to say, you know, I recognize something has happened here in Canada. It's recognizing Indigenous peoples and the oppressive history. It's recognizing, often used to recognize the land. So really thinking about the land that we're walking on. Often the Eurocentric worldview towards land is that it doesn't have a spirit. It doesn't have anything. It's something you can own, something you can walk on, something that you can tear apart and take the energy from it. You can extract things from it. You can pass it around. You can dig it up and move it around, and that's okay. But the Indigenous worldview perspective of land is that it's a relation. It's one of the foundational teachings of all my relations, that it's an attitude and a behavior and a relationship with land that it's treated like our auntie or your grandmother. It's so you would never dig up and destroy your auntie without respectfully consulting with it or treating it as something of great honor, right? And so land acknowledgements are used to also acknowledge the land spirit, and also those who steward to the land too, right? So thinking about that. I've heard quite a variety of land acknowledgements. It's great when it's authentic and personal. So I've heard people acknowledge when their settlers first came, settler ancestors first came to Turtle Island. Within the land acknowledgement, sometimes it acknowledges the local nations that have been there. It's important to know that there's more than just First Nations. There's Métis and Inuit. Those folks need to also be acknowledged too. And that often we weren't bound by the borders that we have today. So that is why there's a lot of places, like for example, Edmonton is known as a traditional treating place. So it's a place of gathering. So a lot of Inuit came down, a lot of Métis have made their homes here. Nations from the south have come up to here to gather. So if we think about the land and the history of the land, it holds the hearts and footsteps of many generations. And it's that piece also that you can work into land acknowledgement. So there's a lot of ways to go to make it authentic and meaningful, but it's a gesture of reciprocity and it's a gesture of moving forward. And in order to really see if your land acknowledgement is hitting home, if you're not of Indigenous descent, is to simply ask for some feedback. How is this resonating with you? Is this, am I hitting the mark? Are you feeling that we are approaching this relationship in a good way? And that takes humility and courage, and it's a simple way of connecting.
Thank you, Jessica. Judges, we are going to paraphrase one of the questions Jessica had for our challengers this week and ask our panel judges the same question later this evening. But before we continue, we want to let everyone know that this week comes with a trigger warning. Images submitted for this match brief include depictions or references to residential schools, non-consensual medical experiments on Indigenous, First Nation, and Inuit peoples, region, politics, and both literal and figurative death in the context of killing the Indian in the child. If you are feeling emotionally or psychologically triggered, we ask that you prioritize self-care. This week's match brief asks challengers to explore their own relationships with Indigenous, First Nation, and/or Inuit culture themselves, in themselves, their family, and their communities. Concepts were built out of the research that the shooters did and resulted in everything from personal reflections to critiques of Canada's intentionally obscure political history. Let's bring up the slides, Hope. For our first slide, we have Bonnie's. So before we get into the mentoring, we wish to acknowledge Bonnie, who is also located on Treaty 6 territory, who, despite being out of the running for the grand prize, has continued to submit images each week as part of her personal and professional growth. Bonnie admitted that this week was a steep learning curve for her and expressed her gratitude for finally being able to understand the significance of the gifts her grandparents would bring her while they worked in northern Alberta townships. As she holds these gifts so dear to her own heart, Bonnie felt compelled to explore how heritage was both changed and stripped by making cultural practices like art and dance difficult, if not illegal. Thank you, Bonnie, for your submission again this week. It's beautiful. Next slide, Hope. This is an image of all of all the images from our remaining challengers this week. As we are down to the final 4, we have time to discuss all of the images. So in no particular order, let's get started. Next slide, Hope. This image here is done by Martha. It is titled Ulatet, Right Here. Martha joins us from the traditional lands of the Hope.
Wolastoqiyik. Wolastoqiyik and Mi'kmaq.
Mi'kmaq, yeah. Sorry, I look at it and it doesn't want to come out of my mouth.
Wolastoqiyik and Mi'kmaq.
Wolastoqiyik.
Yep.
And Mi'kmaq. Thank you. Martha, based on the judge's suggestions, there are 2 questions for you. Other than the topic you shot for your own brief, what did you consider shooting this week and why?
The other topic that I thought about shooting, and something that I'm very interested in, is the moderate living fisheries that the Mi'kmaq people here who live fairly close to me are reestablishing. It's a very political issue here because it sort of puts settlers directly against the Mi'kmaq fishers, and it's been very contentious. So that was a thought that I had, but I decided that this was more, I don't want to say more important, but children are just so special, and to think about the atrocities that they experienced, and that there is a path forward for Mi'kmaq children today. I just felt more compelled to shoot this image and stay away from perhaps that more politically contentious concept.
Thank you. How have you grown by taking part in this Truth and Reconciliation theme brief? And how will it affect you going forward?
Well, I feel like I made some new friends that I didn't know before. People that I think I could connect with again, if there were other projects or things that, we could work on together or help each other with. Taya is just a sweetheart, and her dad is considering a political position within the band. So it was really great to connect with them. While doing this, I did come across a course at the University of Alberta in Indigenous history that I've enrolled in. It's a free course open to anybody. There's an open enrollment. And I think that is a good starting place for me to become, I perceive myself as an ally of the First Nations people, but I've realized perhaps through this process that I'm still very much in a learning phase. So before I can truly become an ally, I feel like I need to educate myself much more.
Thank you very much, Martha. Jessica, there is a significant need for more Indigenous, First Nation, and Inuit presence in politics. You scored this image high on both hit and power factor and said in your comments for all challengers this week that the human connection played a big factor in how much the images spoke to you. Why is humanizing the dehumanized elements of Canada's history with Indigenous, First Nations, and Inuit people so important?
This is a great question. For me, I have lived experience, obviously. I have lived through a lot of childhood trauma, a lot of racist things that have happened to me, even as an adult. There are places that I can walk through that I'm automatically assumed to be a hooker or drunk or impoverished or less than the people around me. There are places where I go where I feel very excluded. When it comes to humanizing this, what is important to realize is that there are people right now still living with active racism. There are people living right now, most of us Indigenous people lived with PTSD or complex PTSD, and I walk with that. Yet I have to run the same race as everybody else, and sometimes even better. And for me, this image really brought to home that it is someone living and breathing right now that is feeling the effects of intergenerational trauma and still living in the oppressive systems that exist today. I mean, this person is going to go through an education system that's not going to talk about their history necessarily, going to perhaps be in spaces where there's not a lot of people that look like them, and are going to walk through the world in a way that unfair and unjust things may happen to them. And they're going to be burdened with the trauma. They're going to be burdened with the healing that they're going to have to do on their own. But hopefully through things like this, through the awareness, through taking courses, people will reach out to this person and build a support system around them. So this image and the humanizing of it is something that really spoke to me because it is present and it's the future that we really need to shift and change, because the past and the bundles that we carry are very heavy.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Panel judges. Martha's image was as close to technically flawless as an image can get. Yet all three panel judges commented on how the lighting and posing of the model was perhaps not the right choice. What could Martha have done to incorporate more storytelling or otherwise elevate this image? Spencer, could you start us off, please?
If I remember, and I agree with Jessica, this is a really fantastic portrait because it does put a face to an issue that a great many of us hear about, but really never see. So it's really, and it's just a beautiful portrait as well. As far as the storytelling elements, if I can remember this, the write-up, there were quite a few mentions of, I think, her father as well, and some other other elements. And I'd like to see those elements. I mean, you know, in journalism, if you say something, you've got to sort of also illustrate it to a degree. So I'd like to see some of those things worked in. I think it was her dad or grandmother. Maybe that other figure is back in the background, really subtle, very little light on it, but we see a figure there that would get to the intergenerational aspect to this. And also, if she just turned her shoulders a little bit, I'm curious to see what's on the front of her shirt and some of the, I don't know if it's beads or feathers. That would be good to see as well.
Thank you, Spencer. Maggie and Ronald, you are free to answer the question that I have asked, but also if you'd like to add any other thoughts or critique that you have for this image. So feel free to answer.
The image itself is beautiful. The girl's beautiful. The ornaments around her hair, very nice props. It just doesn't tell the story in the brief. So looking at it, you're not sure, is this a, you know, like what kind of portrait is this supposed to be?
Okay. Maggie?
So for me, again, very same as the other judges, very powerful portrait. I loved it from a lighting perspective. I would have liked to have seen just a little more light in behind so that she doesn't fall into the dark quite as much, just subtle. And I might have seen, again, talking about the brief a little bit, there was mention of her grandmother and like mentioned hair and things like that. So maybe she could have been interacting with her braids or that to kind of bring that like to tie those two together a little bit. But overall, I really loved it and really great choice of concept, Martha.
Thank you.
Thank you, judges. Martha, do you have any questions for the judges today or anything that you'd like to talk about for your image?
I just wanted to clarify one thing in terms of the orange shirt, because I waffled back and forth on that, whether or not to show what was written on front. But I thought that the orange shirt, it's so emblematic of Every Child Matters, that I didn't feel that there was a need to show what was on the front. So that was actually a very conscious decision, not to show the front of the church, of the shirt. That was Freudian, gee. Yeah, so that was a choice. I also wanted to add one thing, and I'll just be 1 second. We shot this almost at the foot of where the residential school in Shubenacadie stood. We did these portraits, and then we went to the monument for the residential school. The school's no longer there, but there's a permanent monument there. And we all just had a very, there was a physical reaction to walking into that space, which I'm not sure I've ever really had before, walking into a piece of land. But you could feel the energy of the past there. And these kids are amazing. They have beautiful parents who are raising them in their traditions, and it's lovely to see.
Thank you very much, Martha. Next slide. Thank you. This is Stacey's image, The Skeleton Closet of Canada's Food Guide. Stacey joins us from Niagara, also covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. Stacey, this week you chose to explore the topic of how Canada's Food Guide was actually developed as a result of taking advantage of the situation occurring in residential schools that would otherwise be hard to recreate, which was malnutrition. Instead of stopping this from happening, researchers studied starvation in these government-sanctioned facilities. Other than the topic you shot for your own brief, what did you consider shooting this week and why?
I also considered shooting, maybe touching on the War of 1812. The role of the Indigenous peoples kind of like unheard of here, but I decided ultimately that the food guide would be more impactful.
Thank you. How did you, how have you grown by taking part in this Truth and Reconciliation theme brief, and how will it affect you going forward?
Well, I discovered the local friendship center here, which I didn't really know about. I went down a rabbit hole, actually. They have a YouTube channel, and I watched a few hours worth of video they created. So I learned like quite a bit from that. Now that I follow them, I'm just interested to see like what else I can learn.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Jessica, as many strides have been made, it's likely a large portion, if not the vast majority of Canadians who are unaware of these kinds of dirty little Canadian secrets. In your opinion, how essential to Truth and Reconciliation is it to help Canadians question the history books?
This is a great question for sure. It is definitely very essential that folks take up this and understand the truth. With the recent residential school recoveries, people automatically think residential schools are the only horrific thing that has happened in this country, or that is still happening. And that is not true. There are still so many different facets, especially like if we look at basic human rights, access to clean water. This is on my mind today as we're prepping for another talk for the United Nations, actually, for the status of women. Talking to this, that the basic human rights aren't there because of the layers of different systems, the layers of oppression that comes through the Indian Act. And that is just for the First Nations. We haven't even touched upon the layers and tactics that the government has taken towards Métis and the Inuit to the north. Things like road allowance communities for the Métis. The last road allowance community, I think, was still in 2003, 2004, where people were living on the sides of the roads in the little pieces of crown land that go where infrastructure corridors can go because their land has been taken away, because script wasn't honored because the land claims weren't there. They weren't given a place to make a home or community, and instead all their lands were taken with or without their consent. And this, like, all these things add up to communities that are broken and people that are broken. And then the stereotypes and the expectations then are on these people of just get it together. Like, why aren't they doing better? Like, why don't they have clean water? Why don't they just do this and do that? But the hurt is there. And just this whole portrait and this whole piece that was done here is definitely a good way to display around some of these other things that people haven't even started to talk about more commonly. Residential schools is just one of hundreds of different things that aren't fair and aren't just because of these things. So I think it is vital that that this be talked about, that the facts be known, and that why that has led to a whole demographic of people within this country that need to heal and are still being oppressed.
Thank you, Jessica. Panel judges. Like Martha, Stacey intentionally used dramatic lighting to show the dark side of Canada's food guide. All of the judges felt this was an important and effective technique, but it seems the composition left everyone wanting a bit more. Maggie, we will ask you to start us off on what you felt could have improved the layout of this image.
So I'm going to start off by saying thank you so much for creating this. And from reading what you wrote, I was not aware of this, and wow, it just blew my mind. So thanks for that. Really great image in terms of storytelling and kind of, you know, that that wow factor. And for me, I think one thing that might have elevated it just a little more would have been to possibly, and I know it's again, maybe a difficult thing, but to have some hands in there, or to have something in the frame that just kind of adds a little bit more to the storytelling element. But in terms of like the lighting and technically, the image was very, very well done.
Thank you, Maggie. Spencer or Ronald, would you like to weigh in?
Okay, I'll go. Really good elements, and as Maggie said, this I too had never heard of this before, and I just read it with with horror that this went on. So, you know, I'm glad I now know it to appreciate the food guide even more. When I first looked at it, there's some great lighting coming from the side. And yes, the left side is a little bit darker, but I think to set up a real difference, I'd like to see the one side brighter and the other side much darker, so that there is, I immediately get a visual that there's two things going on here, rather than just a plate that's a little bit further away from the light. I did zoom in and then just discover that there were maggots in the food, which was a great little element to add as well. And I don't know if I've got this completely wrong, but when they were testing the children on the food, is it sort of the same food but just less of it? Or was it, in this case, we've got, quite a healthy plate, and then we've got what looks like porridge. So is it like comparing apples and apples, or is it apples and oranges? So if it was the same food, but they were going after sort of the effects of starvation, maybe it's the same amount of food, or it's the same foods, but a minuscule amount of it as well.
Can I jump in on this one, Billy?
Yes, you may.
And Jessica, please correct me if I mess this up, if you're more familiar than I am. So what they were fed in the residential schools was actually gruel, exactly what you see in the picture. And there are personal accounts from survivors from residential schools that would discuss that this is what they were being fed, and they would have to pick the maggots out before they could eat it. And they would often end up, they would be served rotten leftover fruit and vegetables and that sort of thing. And if they weren't served fruit and vegetable on a specific day, or if they were hungry, they would go dig it out of the swill for the pigs so that they would actually have something besides gruel. So they weren't being fed the same thing in different amounts. They were actually being served different things. And the reason why the Canadian government jumped on board with using this opportunity is because they had a population of malnutrition children that they didn't have to create and that they didn't have to be responsible for, because no parent in their right mind would ever sign their child up to be malnutritioned on purpose. So instead of stopping it, the government went in and used this as an opportunity to look at what a malnutrition child looked like.
Just to add to that, this wasn't the only medical testing that was done. There was physical things. There are survivors with scars of being cut open to look at muscles and tissues and things like that. But this one, for sure, this piece was, for me, out of all of them, the most triggering, because the ironic thing of all of this is that because of time in residential schools, nutritional issues like diabetes and things like that are high in Indigenous communities. And my family has diabetes within it. And my family are all residential school survivors. And when I was pregnant with my kids, I had gestational diabetes. And what did they tell me to use? They told me to use the Canada Food Guide. And it's that piece that just made me quite angry this week. Like, these things are our lived experience, and we're the product of these types of systems and these types of testing. And it does make me quite angry. And so this piece, though, I think is very effective as an awareness piece for sure.
Thank you. Ronald, do you have anything to say on this image?
The story, the brief was very moving and powerful. I didn't know that that they basically took advantage of the residential kids that way. And more information is coming out now about all the atrocities. Regarding the image itself, I'm a lot more critical about it for a few things. First, the hand doesn't look like a child's hands. It looks like an adult's hand. It's a little large. The lighting is highlighting the right-hand side. So we get, we're highlighting the title of the image, but that's not really the focus, I think. I think the focus is actually the left-hand side, as Spencer mentioned. And compositionally, there's 4 equal sectors to this image that's competing with us for our attention. So if we could, again, like what Spencer mentioned, if we can swap it so that the attention, the lighting, and everything's on the hand, then the rest of it would tie in together. So it makes more, so the brief and this one will support each other.
Thank you, Ronald. Hope and I wanted to point out, we discuss all of your images every single week. And for this image, Stacy, what we thought might help with showing this terrible thing is that perhaps instead of having the plates being different sizes, having them be the same size, and the maggot-filled porridge be a small portion, and the maggots to actually be crawling on the plate. I think that might create a more impactful, and maybe some rotten fruit and things like that could have shown exactly what it was that they were eating, right? The other thing is you could have, that bigger plate would have made that hand look a lot smaller. And so that was our views on that this week. So we just wanted to make sure that there was a way that you could have combated the differing opinions on your image this week. All right, Hope, let's move on to the next one. This is Nikki Lynn, Healing the Future Through Knowledge of the Past. Nikki Lynn is joining us from Norman Wells, home of the Satu, Dene, and Métis people who continue disputing the numbered treaties covering their ancestral lands. Nikki Lynn, your image this week was a self-portrait that saw the judges taking an immediate peek into you learning about the history of your husband's family from your mother-in-law, identified on her mug of tea as the world's best grandma. It was such a transformative experience for you that you've already decided to make another date to hear more stories and start literally and figuratively unpacking your children's history and heritage. Other than the topic you shot for your own brief, what did you consider shooting this week and why?
Well, this was the first thing that came to my mind. It was like almost this image of just sitting with her and talking with her and being with my mother-in-law. However, I did have an alternative just in case, because I wasn't sure if she was going to, be available. There was other things that were happening that weekend as well. But the other thing that I had in mind was working with another elder in town who's a friend of mine, who is in the middle of writing a book right now. Actually, she's writing I guess a biography of her life and her history, and she's asked me already to do some images for her book. So that was kind of my second choice. I thought maybe if I sat with her and we discussed the things that were going to be in her book, and just that kind of image. But it worked out perfect that my mother-in-law was available, because the other friend of mine wouldn't have been anyways, but that was my second choice.
Thank you. How have you grown by taking part in this Truth and Reconciliation theme brief this week? And how will it affect you going forward?
I am so grateful for this challenge because I never would have taken the time to do this. I mean, this has been my mother-in-law for 20 years, and we've done this, but not just me and her together. I've never said, hey, let's spend a Saturday afternoon and go through your pictures and have conversation. And it was just amazing. Like both of us, it was just amazing. We had such a great day. Even later that day, I ended up going to the store and I seen her like maybe 2 hours later, and I said, oh, I haven't seen you in a while. And she was just like, I had such a great day. And I said, me too. And I ended up being at their house like 4 days in a row, just visiting throughout all this. So the connection that we made doing it, I'm very grateful for, because like I said, we just don't take the time to do that. And I feel kind of bad that there had to be a challenge for me to do it. But through this, we did decide that, yeah, she's got a whole bunch of empty albums and we're going to organize all these pictures, because right now they're just kind of all over the place. So we're going to have another date to get together and itemize everything. And so we're looking forward to that. So that was what I learned, that we should take the time to do this without having a challenge.
Thank you so much, Nikki Lynn. Panel judges. Nikki Lynn's image is busy, period. And yet none of the judges thought the busyness was an epic fail. Ronald, as a person who generally prefers clean, simple images, what was it that made this image feel complex and deep instead of just plain busy?
So this was a special image in that it's a perfect image. And basically, sometimes some images have a special quality from what you're capturing in that moment. And the person in it. The special magical touch to this image is the grandmother telling the family history. And it's even augmented by this is mother-in-law, right? Mother-in-law telling the family history. It's even augmented by the photographer. Her expression is a bit, you can read, concern on her expression. Compositionally wise, it's also good, rural thirds, right? And nice use of contrast, our eyes looking right at the grandma. The table, those props support what's going on here. Like this is a telling of basically the stories of her past. So I thought it was perfect, like technically and emotionally hit the mark.
Thank you, Ronald. Spencer or Maggie, would you like to weigh in?
I'll go. I love this image. It immediately grabbed me, and what I've been saying, you guys probably get tired of my critiques when I'm just like, oh, great storytelling image, but this completely was. I loved the fact that it is busy, but the busyness is important to helping tell the story. If all those photographs weren't on the table, it wouldn't have the same effect for me. Overall, just really well done this week.
Maggie.
I like the busyness. I love the fact that it's black and white, so our eyes are not distracted by something that's really colorful off in the corner. The table being completely filled with what looked like little Ziploc bags and photos, and being really busy is fantastic. Love the grandmother's expression and how she's kind of, she's got this beautiful look looking over at Nikki. For me, I just found the background was just a little bit busy as well. My eyes, look at the table, of course, but then they're sort of off looking at what's on the shelves a little bit. So that's the only thing, but it's a beautiful, beautiful, it's a beautiful story.
Thank you, Spencer. Nikki Lynn, Hope and I also recognized you had said something about you didn't intend to be in the photographs necessarily. But Hope and I agreed that if you weren't in these photographs, it would not have had the same impact and storytelling if you weren't. So just wanted to let you know that. Yeah. Nikki Lynn, do you have anything that you'd like to say to the judges? Or have a question or say about your image? Sorry.
No, not really. I was happy with all the comments, and I was worried about people thinking that it was too busy, because it really was, but I didn't want to change anything. Like when I decided to do this with her, I just set up the camera kind of off in the corner, and I didn't want the picture to be the center of what we were doing. So I put it on interval timer on silent. So we didn't even know when the pictures were going. We were just actually talking and doing our thing. So I didn't want to change any of her house, and I didn't want it to make, I wanted it to be special, just what we were doing. So I didn't, it was just exactly authentic. That's exactly what we were doing. And the best grandma ever mug I didn't even try that. I just got us some tea. That mug was the first one I grabbed for her, and it wasn't even a planned thing. So this is kind of perfect.
Awesome. Thank you,
Can I just jump in on this one too? Yes, if that's all right.
Absolutely can, Jessica.
What I like about this too is that I get a chance, and I'm blessed to be able to talk with a lot of elders and knowledge keepers. And this look of your mother-in-law is so inspiring to Indigenous people, right? Because so many elders and knowledge keepers have been through so much in their lifetime, yet they walk the 7 sacred teachings, and they walk all these teachings, and they're hopeful and they're happy, and they are so inspiring that they have come to a place where they're healed. And in her expression, she looks so healed, and she's happy, and she's grounded in family, she's grounded in kinship. I like the plants in the background, because that's how we live with natural law. You need to surround yourself with all sorts of relations, including plants. But the photos, especially because she's reliving some of the things that she's been through. And that can be re-traumatizing when you tell these stories over and over again. But her expression doesn't say that it's re-traumatizing telling that. It's just that she's healed. And for me, this image makes me so happy, because it gives me hope that I can get to that spot, that the people around me can get to that spot of being able to share these experiences and help people grow without it hurting anymore. And I'm just so happy that it seems like she's at that point, and I really hope that she is.
Thank you, Jessica. I want to let you know that I did have a question for you, but you've already answered it. So thank you very much. Hope, let's move on to the next slide, please. This is Shauna's image and the forest left. Shauna joins us from the unceded lands of the Abenaki people and the Wabanaki Confederacy. Shauna, after your win of last week's self-portrait brief, it has become apparent that your superpower is vulnerability. The work and worth of an empath is being able to make your feet shrink or expand, however necessary to fit into someone else's shoes, even when it's your own. Other than the topic that you shot for your own brief, what did you consider shooting this week and why?
During some of my research, I discovered that there's actually a national healing forest close to me that I really wanted to go to visit. It didn't work out with weather, and I'm planning on visiting next week. Actually, I've made connections with the individual that it's on his land. The healing forest did give me inspiration for the image that I did shoot last week. So.
Thank you. And how have you grown by taking part in this Truth and Reconciliation theme brief? And how will it affect you going forward?
I've learned through research this week and learning that I don't know enough as I should. And there's lots of instances in my life where I should have spoken up when I've heard comments or I've heard different points of view and I didn't. So just learning how I can be a better ally moving forward and to continue learning going forth. Yeah.
Thank you, Shauna. Jessica. Shauna wanted to include an element of a spirit hovering between states in this image and received mixed reviews on whether or not it worked. A connection to spirit is often represented by smoke. Do you think smoke would have been a more suitable way of representing spirit? Or is this image powerful enough without the representation of spirit?
It's a very good question. When walking with the medicine wheel, you want to be able to walk in balance with physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health, right? And the spiritual connection is an important piece. And everybody has to figure out what that means to them, what their purpose here is, what happens when we pass away, what happens, all that stuff. And so everybody has to figure that out for themselves. For me, yes, the way spirit was represented was a little confusing to me. A spirit is a thing that's very personal of how you picture it in your head, right? And for Indigenous people, yes, we use smoke as to carry messages up to spirit, up to the Great Spirit, up to Creator as well. I think smoke would have been, I would have understood that a little bit more than how a spirit was represented in this image, or even thinking through, because in my comments back, I commented as well around the seasonality of this, because there's a lot of teachings in the seasons too, right? And so this was placed in winter. Winter is a time of reflection and hibernation and rest and reflection. I think maybe spirit could have been represented away through the snow as well. But yeah, smoke, I think would have been a good choice too. I think I would have connected and understood that a little bit more.
Thank you, Jessica. Panel judges. Shauna received very similar comments to the image she created a few weeks ago featuring a woman holding a singing bowl. Use a wider aperture, pull your subject away from the trees, crop tighter. How do you know or sense that you have outgrown the capacity of your equipment? And how do you figure out what to do, or sorry, what you are going to invest in next? Oh, Maggie.
So in terms of equipment, what I always say, and before I buy a new piece of gear in any respect, whether it's a lens or a camera, is essentially, is the gear that I'm using right now restricting me in some way or holding me back? So do I need more megapixels? Am I going to be blowing the images up really big? Do I need stuff that's going to work better in low light situations? And do I need something that'll have an aperture of 1.8, 1.4? So that type of thing, you know, using those apertures allows you to separate something from a background a lot easier in that capacity. So for me, in terms of this image specifically, I would have liked to have seen the chair separated or a little bit more clean around the chair from the background. So for me, again, I don't know what the area was like where you were shooting, but moving the chair or finding a different angle such that the immediate kind of edges of the chair aren't in the trees might have worked a little better in my opinion. But the overall, for me, the story and the concept behind this image I thought was really well done.
Thank you, Maggie. Spencer or Ronald, would you like to say anything?
Regarding the image or regarding your question?
You can answer the question or you can talk to the image, either or.
For the image, I think if there was a tighter crop, it'd be more effective, so that we could see what, you know, the four things on the desk that sort of represent the residential schools. So yeah, that would be the main one for me. Just because it's sort of hard to notice there's three, the beads and all that stuff on the chair. And the extra space during the floors, we can still get that. The smoke and the reflection, I wasn't actually sure. Like I thought it was interesting. There's a reflection there. I'd be interested to hear how photographer did that. I didn't know it was smoke of the spirits. So that wasn't, I didn't get that at all. But now that I know, it's interesting. Now it's become, that's interesting.
Thank you, Ronald. Spencer?
I'd kind of like to see this actually as a horizontal and come down, bring the chair a lot closer to the camera so we can, as Ronald said, see the elements on the desk, but also really heighten the fact that this is a common object in an uncommon space, which sets up a real contrast. I got what you were doing with the spirits. I think you can still do that as a horizontal, but a forest is wide, so I'd like to see a little bit more of it, because then that'll accentuate, the smallness of the chair in the vastness of the space. And I think that with some really, so I've got a suggestion with how you, two ways perhaps how you could do the spirit, and that is, if you had a really long shutter speed, maybe you've got a 10-stop neutral density filter or something, so it's a long exposure, you could have somebody sitting in the chair or standing behind the chair for only half the time, so that you sort of see through that person. And the other one would be, if you were to use a bit of raking light, you could then pick up just really fresh footsteps coming away from the chair. And that would be really subtle, but that would get a bit of humanity into the picture.
Thank you, Spencer. Shauna, again, Hope and I were discussing, like the using the wider aperture and pulling your subject away, that's things like that. And we weren't sure what type of gear that you had to be working with. But we both thought, like, if you are ever thinking that you're being limited by your gear, the best thing that you can do is go to your local camera shop. And if they've got rentals, start renting lenses to see which ones will work for you for the type of work that you plan on doing, just like Maggie said. Okay.
And I'm also curious, because it's been asked now, how was the spirit created? What did you do to create the blue-green haze in the background?
I actually used Boris Optics. It's a editing program, and I just fiddled around in there.
Thank you. Shauna, do you have any questions for the judges or anything that you would like to talk about your image?
No, I agree again and appreciate everyone's comments, and I appreciate the learning opportunities. So thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our mentoring for this week. Panel judges, as promised, we are going to paraphrase the question Jessica had for our challengers this week. What have you learned, and or have you grown by taking part in this Truth and Reconciliation themed brief? Ronald, would you like to go first?
This one was powerful for me because I actually have been following the residential schools. My parents are Catholic, and I actually live very close to a Catholic school. And a friend of mine, she's part Aboriginal, so I've been having discussions with her about this. And when it first came out, they did the X-rays of the underground. I was totally shocked, and I was quite angry at the Catholic Church. I'm not religious, but nonetheless, this exercise this week has given me more clarity and understanding of what happened and how people are dealing with it now. because that's a big mystery. We hear all these horror stories, but there's a lot missing, you know. Yeah.
Thank you, Ronald. Maggie?
So for me, I think kind of two things. The first part of this whole experience was seeing the images and reading the artist statements, and I learned a lot through those. And it really opened my eyes into what I don't know and what I need to better educate myself for sure. And I also want to say, this past hour with you, Jessica, this has been very eye-opening. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to share with us and teach us. And hopefully, you know, you've helped us grow and inspired us to do better. So for me, this past hour has been really eye-opening, and I'm so grateful for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maggie. Spencer?
Same as Ronald and Maggie, it's been a real education, and certainly by reading the artist statements, especially with the food guide background, you know, it's really made me pause and think back to, you know, experiences I've had in Inuit communities and living in Attawapiskat a few times, and really makes me kind of think back on those times and really want to sort of, you know, revisit them in my mind and kind of figure things out. It's really given me a lot to think about.
Thank you. Jessica, we have a little question for you. Given your field of expertise and your professional and personal goals, how would you rate this week's challenge on raising awareness?
Hearing the commentary from both the shooters as well as the judges, I think it was quite effective in creating awareness. And so I appreciate everybody's willingness to take part in this brief, and take part to really take it to heart. Did you see that out in the images? And of course, the learning that has come for the judges through judging the images as well. So very effective, I think.
Thank you. This is the second year that we've done this challenge, and it may be something that we continue to include in our yearly, you know, setting up of challenges. So, you know, any feedback that you're willing to give us, we are open to all of that. Thank you. So we know everyone wants to know who won this week, but we're going to torch you a little bit more, just a little bit longer. Then we're going to talk about some housekeeping. TSR's top three will battle it out for the finale when Benjamin Von Wong joins us as our final guest judge of season 2. But they get 2 weeks to do that. So what happens in the meantime? Well, we are flipping the script and give the challengers the opportunity to step into the role of admin and create a brief, as well as step into the shoes of the judges and score submissions. Welcome to week 9, Forever Young.
Hello, finalists, and congratulations for making it to the portfolio round. My name is Benjamin Von Wong, and while I've been described as a hyper-realistic photographer, I actually consider myself much more of an activist, because everything I do for a cause. I see art as a tool to do good in the world, and I try my best to discover issues that are important and support them. As a result, your mission for the final portfolio challenge is to submit 5 images representing what you are truly, madly, and deeply passionate about. Each image must tell a story in and of itself, but should tie to the central theme of your portfolio. Your ultimate goal? You want to make the judges not only want to learn more, but be excited enough about your subject that we can't wait to spark a conversation and pass it along to someone else anytime that opportunity presents itself. So this is a huge undertaking. You'll be relieved to know that you have 2 weeks to prepare your portfolio, but don't feel too relaxed. For your week off, you'll have to put yourself in the judge's shoes. And instead of submitting your own images, you'll be responsible for scoring, critiquing, and stepping into the role of mentor during the Zoom for admin, panel, and guest judges who create an image depicting a very busy image representing their inner child. Shooters, your portfolio is due by no later than 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on Sunday, March 13th. So please remember that this is the day we spring ahead with daylight savings. I genuinely hope you enjoy playing the role of guest judge next week and look forward to meeting you all for the live Zoom on March 16th, when the winner will be awarded a prize pot including $1,500 in cash and over $5,000 in swag and services, and earn the coveted title of Season 2 Range Master. Happy shooting.
Everybody has been given that brief. Right now, the challengers are wondering, are you guys going to participate in this week's challenge? Oh, radio silence. Is there yeses? Are we going to raise our hands?
I'm considering it. I've been thinking of some ideas.
Okay.
I already have mine done.
Woo! Good, Maggie.
I would like to participate as well. I have some ideas, if that's right.
You
Yes!
are absolutely welcome to join in on this week's challenge.
Yeah, the forever, and you've seen the brief. It's to create the busiest image that you possibly can, include as many elements as you can that represent what it's like to have a conversation with your inner child. So I'm excited to see what you guys. One of the other admin is participating. I can't this week. I would love to, but I'm trying to make Billy go too. But we'll see.
I realized that I don't have an inner child, so I don't know how to execute this. I've been thinking about it, but I don't know how I can do it because I just don't think I have one.
We'll be shipping the brief out again to all of the panel and guest judges. Maggie, I'm excited to see what you made. Super excited. And we do have a video coming, but that's my fault because I haven't made it yet because I was busy today. So sorry. Yeah, but I'll turn it back to Billy. Spencer, are you thinking about doing it?
The shoot is on tomorrow.
Yay!
Stacy's so excited.
She's so excited right now. She's just laughing her ass off right now in the corner. I can see it. All right, Billy, I'll turn it back to you. Yay!
Now it's time to see who this week's sharpshooter is, who needs target practice, and who will be leading the firing line. Sending challengers home each week is always difficult. The reality is judges, admin, and your co-competitors kind of get attached and want everyone to succeed and stay. But we do have to say goodbye to the challenger who will be leading the firing line tonight. TSR wishes to acknowledge first and foremost that this week, more than any other throughout the competition, has been a win for everyone, and that the shooters have been able to spark awareness and conversation about Canada's long overdue journey towards truth and reconciliation. Hope, please bring up the next slide. Going home this week, we have Stacy. Stacy, you have produced many thought-provoking and creative images for this competition, and we are gutted to see you go. Sorry, I knew that was going to happen and I didn't prepare myself well enough for it. We hope that you will still shoot your final concept for the challenge coming up and submit it for critique. But even if you decide to take this week off and if you just poke your co-competitors, we expect to see your face for the final live mentoring to cheer on your ride or die partner, Martha. Stacy, would you like to say anything?
Thank you. I had so much fun and I can't wait to see you guys struggle because it's hard. But no, I'm happy for you guys. All three of you, any of you who win, will be so happy for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Judges, do you have any words of encouragement or anything that you would like to say to Stacy before she leaves us?
I love her imagination, and I'm looking at the upper left. That one I really remember, and there's some really strong, powerful images, and I really like the variety. So just keep on shooting.
Thank you.
So for me, Stacey, you are extremely talented. It didn't matter what the challenge was, you rose to the occasion, and all of your images are very nice, technically, you know what you're doing. So just keep creating. I'm so excited to follow you in your journey. And yeah, just thank you for sharing and making us think and telling us stories. I really appreciate it.
Well, Stacey, you have some talent, and I encourage you to develop and grow it.
Thank you. Hope, next slide, please. Martha, Shauna, and Nikki Lynn, congratulations are in order. You three are through to the finale with guest judge Benjamin Von Wong and are eligible to win over $7,000 in cash and prizes. In third place, we have Shauna. In second place, we have Martha, which means Nikki Lynn, you are this week's sharpshooter. Congratulations. Your image this week was unanimous. All the judges agreed that your image executed the brief the best this week. Tell your mother-in-law thank you from us to her, and also tell yourself thank you from us to you for putting yourself in this poignant and important image. Nikki Lynn, do you have anything that you would like to say?
No, just thank you so much. I can't wait to tell her. I got a text from my father-in-law at 8 o'clock this morning, and he was like, so how did you do? And I'm like, I'm not gonna know until tonight. So they're excited. So I think they'll be over the moon about this. My mother-in-law was really happy to do this with me, and she's just as excited as I am. So I'm glad that it all worked out, and thank you all so much. I'm really enjoyed this challenge so much, because like I said, I wouldn't have taken the time to do that. And I just, after 20 years, she's been my mother-in-law, but I feel like we just connected so much more over the last few days because we did this, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Nikki Lynn.
It was the best image of the whole competition so far, I think. Nikki Lynn's was tonight.
Thanks.
Hope and myself, as creators of TSR, have decided that we are sponsoring this week's prize, which is a $100 donation made in Nikki Lynn's name to the charity that she chose. Nikki Lynn has chosen the charity Native Women's Association of Canada. The Native Women's Association of Canada is a national Indigenous organization representing the political voice of Indigenous women, girls, and gender diverse people in Canada, inclusive of First Nations, on and off reserve, status and non-status, disenfranchised, Métis, and Inuit. An aggregate of Indigenous women's organizations from across the country. NWAC was founded on the collective goal to enhance, promote, and foster the social, economic, cultural, and political well-being of Indigenous women within their respective communities and Canada's societies. Congratulations again, Nikki Lynn. This concludes week 8. We again want to thank our panel judges and of course, Jessica for her participation. We can't wait to see what admin, panel, and guest judges create for Forever Young. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.